I sat perfectly still, resting my hands lightly on the pristine white tablecloth, as my father loudly declared to a room full of wealthy guests that my career was a fake job. He stood at the head of the table in his $3 million estate, raising his glass to my older brother's flashy corporate success, while deliberately humiliating me to elevate his own pride. They expected me to lower my eyes in shame. They expected me to silently accept my role as the family disappointment, just as I had done for the past 30 years. They genuinely believed their wealth made them untouchable. I stayed completely silent. I took a slow sip of my sparkling water, glanced at my wife who was hiding a knowing smile behind her wine glass, and prepared to deliver a reality check that would completely obliterate their arrogant illusion. My name is Arslan. I am 32 years old, and this is the story of how I used cold, calculated behavioral data to dismantle my toxic family's entire life. Before I tell you exactly how I turned their ultimate humiliation into a legal eviction by the time dessert was served, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to remind an entitled family member that true power doesn't need to shout, it just collects the rent. Growing up, the hierarchy in our household was aggressively rigid. My father was a retired military officer. He was a man who demanded absolute authority, rigid discipline, and traditional markers of masculine success. To him, real men commanded troops or ran massive, cutthroat corporations. My older brother, Tariq, was his undeniable golden child. Tariq was loud, aggressive, and obsessed with the appearance of luxury. He launched a high-end real estate development firm in his 20s, driving a leased Porsche and wearing tailored Italian suits. My father worshipped him, constantly holding him up as the ultimate standard of success. I, on the other hand, was the family embarrassment. I didn't care about flashy cars or country club status. I was an academic. I hold an MPhil in applied psychology and work as a university lecturer, teaching undergraduate courses in psychology and behavioral neuroscience. To my father and brother, teaching was a cute hobby, not a real career. They constantly reminded me that my academic path was a fake job that brought absolutely no prestige to the family name. At every family gathering, Tariq would ask me if I was still playing with students and grading papers, before boasting about his latest supposed multi-million-dollar real estate deal. What neither of them knew, what I deliberately chose never to tell them, was what I was actually doing outside of the university lecture hall. My academic research focused specifically on consumer psychology. More accurately, I studied the precise relationships between self-conceptual traits, materialism, and compulsive buying behavior. I didn't just read about these concepts, I utilized advanced quantitative data analysis and structural equation modeling software like SPSS, AMOS, and SmartPLS to predict human financial behavior. Over 4 years of grueling, silent research, I built a predictive consumer analytics firm. I designed proprietary models that allowed major corporations to anticipate massive market shifts. Fortune 500 companies paid my firm millions of dollars in consulting fees for my data. On top of that, I secured a highly lucrative role as a technical business development manager for a global agricultural company, running their data analytics. I didn't buy a mansion. I didn't boast at dinner parties. I continued teaching my psychology students, quietly enjoying the absolute, untouchable peace of generating an 8-figure net worth in total secrecy. That peace, however, was about to be put to the ultimate test. The psychological ambush took place at my parents' sprawling, $3 million estate. The professor has arrived, my father announced, ensuring the entire room heard him. I was just telling the general about Tariq's new commercial high-rise project. Millions of dollars in movement. And Arslan here, well, Arslan is still lecturing teenagers about their feelings. It's a nice, safe, fake job for someone who doesn't have the stomach for the real world. The room erupted into polite, condescending laughter. Tariq smirked, swirling his expensive scotch. Hey, someone has to grade the papers, Dad. We can't all be building empires. I took my seat quietly. I knew the psychology of these two men perfectly. I didn't just endure their insults, I observed them clinically. Tariq was a textbook case of narcissistic overcompensation combined with severe compulsive buying behavior. The louder he bragged about his wealth, the more desperate he actually was. In my line of work, accessing public financial filings and corporate ledgers was effortless. I knew the exact truth about Tariq's empire. His real estate firm was completely insolvent. Driven by his compulsive need to project a flawless image of materialism, he had overleveraged his properties and taken out predatory bridge loans to fund his luxury lifestyle. He was currently drowning in millions of dollars of toxic debt. Even worse, I knew that my retired military father, blinded by his pride in the golden child, had secretly co-signed Tariq's massive commercial loans, using this exact $3 million estate as collateral to keep the fraudulent empire afloat. Dinner was an agonizing 2-hour marathon of insufferable bragging. I ate in silence, perfectly content to let them live in their delusional bubble. But as the dessert was being served, my father tapped his glass with a silver spoon. He wanted to make one final, grand speech. I watched the exact second Tariq's soul left his body. His eyes darted across the bold black text on the first page. The blood instantly drained from his face, leaving his cheeks a pale, sickly shade of gray. His hands began to shake so violently that the heavy legal paper rustled audibly in the dead silence of the room. "What is it, Tariq?" my father demanded, his military composure faltering. Tariq couldn't speak. He just stared at me, his eyes wide with a frantic, uncomprehending horror. "Since my brother seems to have lost his voice," I announced, turning to address the entire table of wealthy guests, "I will gladly read it for him." I leaned forward, placing my hands flat on the mahogany table. 6 months ago, the bank finally ran out of patience. You defaulted on the massive commercial loans you co-signed for Tariq. The loans he took out to feed his compulsive materialism and fund his fake luxury lifestyle. The bank foreclosed on this property, Dad. They were quietly preparing to send the sheriff here to evict you and auction this estate. My father physically staggered backward. Several of the wealthy guests gasped, whispering furiously to each other. The illusion of the great military patriarch was completely shattered in front of his elite circle. But a private corporate analytics firm stepped in at the last minute, I continued, my voice slicing through the air like a scalpel. An anonymous entity purchased the debt, paid the bank in full, and acquired the absolute, undisputed deed to this historic property. The bank told you the new owner was allowing you to stay as month-to-month tenants while the paperwork settled. You were so relieved to keep up appearances for your country club friends that you didn't even bother to have your lawyers look into the buyer. I tapped my manicured fingernail against the bold signature at the bottom of the settlement document. "I am the sole managing director of that analytics firm," I stated, locking eyes with my father. "I used the profits from my fake job to buy this house in cash. I own the walls. I own the roof. And I own the dining room table where you just told me I don't belong." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a toxic hierarchy being violently inverted. Tariq backed away until he hit the sideboard, looking like a cornered, terrified animal. He knew that I didn't just own the house, I had complete access to the financial data that proved his real estate firm was a massive, insolvent fraud. My father collapsed heavily into his velvet dining chair. The towering, intimidating military officer was completely gone. In his place sat a broken, terrified old man who had just realized his entire kingdom was an absolute mirage, owned entirely by the son he had spent a lifetime mocking. "You demanded respect," I said smoothly, buttoning my gray blazer. "You told me I didn't know what it takes to own a property like this. Well, Dad, as the legal owner of this estate, I am issuing a formal, 30-day notice of eviction. My legal team will serve the paperwork tomorrow morning." I looked at Tariq, who was hyperventilating against the wall. "And Tariq, I highly suggest you stop leasing Porsches and start looking for a real job. Because when the creditors realize you're bankrupt, your empire is going to evaporate." I extended my hand to my wife, who stood up with a brilliant, graceful smile. Enjoy the rest of your dinner party, I announced to the stunned, silent room. Please, make yourselves at home. Just ensure you are completely packed by the end of the month. I walked out the front door into the freezing night air, the heavy oak door slamming shut behind me. I drove away, leaving them entirely alone with the terrifying, inescapable reality of their absolute destruction.